Hello again, Salem. This is Bill from Salem Digest, and I once again am sitting here in the studios at Salem Access Television at 285 Derby Street, and this morning we're speaking with our candidate for Lieutenant Governor, sitting Mayor of Salem, Kim Driscoll. Kim, top of the morning to you. How are you?
Good to see you, Bill.
Or you're just saying that?
No, it is.
Yes, you are.
Beautiful day out there, sun is shining, and I get to spend a few minutes with you.
The sun is shining and getting, I guess that makes up for having to spend a couple of minutes with me. So we're going to jump right into the questions. Put the pressure on you right away.
Okay,
Because you're used to that. All right, you've served 4 full terms here in Salem as mayor.
I've been very blessed.
And you have. And it's you've been recently re-elected and inaugurated for another term, a 5th term, which, if you were to complete this term, you'll tie Francis X. Collins, for longest serving Salem mayor ever. What is it that's driving your desire, especially this year, to seek higher office?
You know, I feel so fortunate to have been elected to lead this city. It's an amazing place, and I think as much as we have this embarrassment of riches when it comes to history, I also believe we have a really bright future, and I've been really proud to be a part of the trajectory of Salem. We're in a place where we have $35 million in federal resources, about to become the offshore wind hub for Massachusetts. You know, I think there's so much happening here as we move towards celebrating our 400th anniversary. So it really has nothing to do with the work that I do and that I love. What's driving me to consider this run for lieutenant governor and to jump in this race is really the knowledge of having been a local official here in Salem for 16 years, prior to that in Chelsea as their deputy city manager and legal counsel, and recognizing the strength of state government to impact communities. No city, even cities with resources like the city of Boston, can really make it alone. You need a strong state partner. That takes people in the State House who understand what's happening on the ground, where the rubber hits the road, I like to say, and the ability to support cities. And right now, at least for me, looking around, there's not a lot of people running for statewide office who understand municipal government, who have been in the trenches, who know how to support and stand up and sort of speak this language that can help make our communities thrive. And in my estimation, when our cities and towns are thriving, our Commonwealth is thriving. And I think there's a missing link, and that's what's sort of propelling me to say, can I use this experience to not only help Salem, but help 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. I've been fortunate to have this role. I love it, and I hope to be able to influence what happens in communities across the Commonwealth as lieutenant governor.
So this conversation that we're having taking place in June, it's my next question here, which is a follow-up really to the first question. It's very appropriate because it's budget month. June is budget month. So Salem's looking at a proposed $188 million budget, which the last budget that I voted on was for 2016 was about $158 million, maybe $159. Yep. So that's a $30 million increase in 6 years. The state budget is coming in at just under $50 billion this year. Now, I know it's a big government, but to be honest with you, that number just boggles my mind. Yeah. But partnering with that, apparently tax revenues are higher than expected. And I had a little trouble finding the exact amount of the budget surplus, but it's got to be over $1.5 billion at this point. You have a reputation, and you've built it as budget savvy, tight budgets, big budgets, but tight budgets, very, very specific, money allocated very specifically. How do you feel your budget abilities and your budget philosophy is going to translate to state government?
I think we have a historic opportunity with the resources between the federal dollars that have come in to support states and the fact that the Massachusetts economy is just humming along in such a way that it's produced additional revenues that can be returned to communities and to services that people rely on. So in my estimation, I'm really hopeful that as someone who's been in the trenches and know how hard it is to make ends meet, like we've done well in Salem, but it's not easy. In fact, this was the hardest budget I've had of all, well, not the hardest. The hardest was definitely the first one, where we were facing multi-million-dollar deficits. But second to that, this was really difficult because there's a lot more demands on, where we need to spend resources, where we'd like to spend resources, and we don't have unlimited dollars. So that prioritization, those values that you ascribe to are going to be so critical. I hope to be able to influence what happens at the state level in support of communities. This is where the work gets done. Educating kids, keeping neighborhoods safe, investing in those places we make memories. And this, in my estimation, is where money needs to flow into. If we're serious about tackling things like high quality pre-K, early education, so critical to our youngest residents in Massachusetts, we're going to need help doing that at the local level. If we're serious about tackling climate change, that means we need to be thoughtful about investing in transportation, one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. Cities and towns can't do that alone. And in Massachusetts, a historic city, we're nearly 400 years old. There are a whole other set of communities that are in that same genre. It's great to be historic, but it also means we've got historic water and sewer and infrastructure needs. If you go down to the Cape, there are places there that the growth that they've seen in that area has really hampered the ability to have, infrastructure systems, water, sewer, utility services that work. So you can't handle that alone as a municipality. So with these historic resources, I hope we're reinvesting them in communities, in people, with a goal towards longer-term economic prosperity.
Fair enough. So you're talking about the money that comes down from the state government. Now, I don't know exactly when this trend started, but I'm very familiar, of course, with the Chapter 91 funding, the Chapter 90 funding, the Chapter 70 and 74 funding.
Yep.
It doesn't even seem, the state used to give us a lot more in those funds and to go toward road and repairs and to go toward school repairs. Now it's less, and it seems to get less every year. Is that trend continuing? Will that trend continue?
Yeah.
Is there something we can do
Right.
to give the city some of their own money back?
Right. It's not less in dollars, it's less in percentages. So we're actually getting more Chapter 70 aid than we've gotten in the past. But if you factor in inflation, and certainly with Chapter 90, it cuts those dollars mightily. So we need to think about that. The cost of repaving roads has gone up exponentially. Frankly, the cost of investing in school buildings, like the school building fund, used to be able to do a lot more projects with the allotment of resources they have. It's been diminished because the cost of building, things has gone up. And we're at a time where we're seeing historic inflation rates. And as that happens, you're going to see tighter and tighter, vice around what municipalities are going to be able to do. So when we have these dollars, we need to be thinking about how can we wisely invest and how can we hold ourselves accountable. There's ballot measures this year, the Fair Share Amendment, that would support additional taxes on higher income earners in Massachusetts that would bring additional dollars back to the Commonwealth for education and transportation. I hope we're going to be accountable for how we spend those dollars, making sure we're thinking about the things that are going to have a high ROI, high return on investment to us. And in my mind, that's improving the quality of life in the places people live, particularly in gateway cities, where we know there are more economically disadvantaged students. There are tend to be, a higher amount of growth and housing happening. How do we make sure we're keeping up with the infrastructure needs in those places as well?
Okay, well, you brought up ballot initiatives, and that's sort of a subject near and dear to a lot of hearts. There was a ballot initiative sometime back to roll back the income tax.
Many years ago.
Yes, which passed, the voters said, yes, let's do this, but somehow it was never implemented.
Right.
Why do you think that is? What's the reasoning for that? And what are the odds, other than the wealthier people getting a larger tax hit, what are the odds of giving the average schmo out there some sort of a tax break at the state level in the next few years?
I mean, I wasn't part of the legislature when they made the move to, sort of change the legislative process slightly to address the rollback. I'm assuming it was a resource issue, that real concern about what would happen with resources. I do believe folks are focused on how do we ensure folks who are, working harder and saving less are getting some piece of the historic resources that we have. I don't think that's a dollar payout as much as it might be, early ed is such a big expense for working families. I, as a mom, had 3 kids. That drop-off, routine every morning. It also felt like a second mortgage payment. There's ways that we can help folks who are working harder, saving less, when it comes to investments more in affordable housing, especially for the missing middle, people who pour coffee, pour beer for a living, paraprofessionals, teachers, educators, school staff, who we want living in our communities, who can't afford to live here. How do we ensure we're supporting affordable housing that's hitting that missing middle? I mean, there's a whole array of housing needs that we have. How do we think about early child care? We know that we expanded pre-K here. I mean, there were parents crying when their kids got into early pre-K. A mom with twins who said to me, this was life-saving for them. Not only are their kids having a phenomenal experience, but it allowed them to actually get some breathing room around expenditures. Twins and early ed, I mean, that's a big expense. When we think about ways that we can reduce the impact communities have on tax rates. Now, we're not at the levy. We're not taxing people the maximum amount we can, but taxes are going to go up this year. And, if we have more resources coming back from the state to support cities and towns, it'll take a little less pressure off, rising real estate taxes. There are plenty of communities that are right at that levy and spend those resources and need to support things going on, in their particular communities. So I think there are ways the state can assist providing resources and services in a way that will help working families, to your point, people who are feeling the real pressure with inflation and gas prices and grocery bills that are going up and making hard to make ends meet.
So as I parse everything you just said, going back to the previous question too, the way you see it, the best solution, the most practical solution is to find a way to bring more dollars directly back to the communities.
I mean, it's communities and it's services that people who live in communities rely on. So early ed, I mean, there's lots of different pathways, from vouchers to setting up expanded pre-K and early ed opportunities within communities, run either by community partners or municipalities. When you think about affordable housing, that may not be a dollar going to a community. It may be working with our nonprofit housing providers, working to subsidize some of the market rate housing, so we're driving down the cost of rents in places. We've done some of that here. There's a lot more work to do in that space. Leveraging public land so that we can reduce the cost of the housing that's being built on public land, thereby having it be a little bit more affordable for folks, who are trying to make ends meet and finding it really difficult. And it doesn't mean that we don't do things like raise the limits under earned income tax credits for folks who are really struggling with lower income levels, increasing circuit breaker tax breaks for seniors who have been on a fixed income. Here in Salem, we just voted to increase our pension COLA and raise the base because we knew that our own retirees were really being harmed by inflation. So there are things that we can do collectively to try and improve the experiences people are having.
First COLA raise for Salem pensioners in 22 or 24 years?
Not 100% accurate. We have done COLAs.
Okay.
There's always a COLA on the first $12,000, but we have raised the base now.
Raised the base.
So that the COLA will be higher, it's going to be on a higher base,
sure.
And therefore provide.
Which increases how much the annual increase would be.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. We're going to lighten it up a little now.
Okay.
Take you off the hot seat a bit. Would you walk us through this process of running for lieutenant governor? It confuses a lot of people. It's not necessarily a matched ticket.
Yep.
The what, the when, the where, and the why of deciding to run, how you campaign for lieutenant governor, and this convention process you just went through.
Yeah. I'm learning too, myself, as someone who's not run statewide before. So when you're running for a statewide office like lieutenant governor, you run alone. So there were 5 candidates. There are now 3 candidates on the Democratic ticket running for lieutenant governor. There are 2 gubernatorial candidates running, and you don't run as a team. You're not prevented from doing that, but on the Democratic side, typically you run independently. And then September 6th, there'll be a primary, and it's a bit of a shotgun marriage. Whoever wins the gubernatorial ticket and whoever wins the lieutenant governor's ticket are then matched up, and there's a coordinated campaign until November. Now, on the Republican side, they typically match up early. Weld Cellucci, Baker Polito, and in this case, the 2 Republican candidates have also sort of selected running mates, and they're sort of running as a team. They will have to get elected individually. So if it could certainly work out where somebody votes for one candidate for governor and not for the other for lieutenant governor. You could have sort of a mixed marriage, so to speak. Now, you cannot have Democrats and Republicans running. In some states, there can be a Democratic governor and Republican lieutenant governor, or vice versa. That can't happen here. Once the primary is set, then you're running a coordinated campaign as a team.
So you go into the convention, and it's not the proverbial smoke-filled room anymore.
Not at all.
And you're basically schmoozing delegates.
There are up to
campaigning amongst
5,000
the
delegates, Democratic delegates
Right.
from cities and towns across the Commonwealth. And there's been a caucus system. To become a delegate, you have to be elected at your
Right.
city or town caucus. And then
Are those the members of the Democratic Committee? Or
could
is that
be
a separate thing?
any registered Democrat can show up and say, hey, I want to be a delegate. I want to go to the convention.
Just show up there.
But you have to be voted in by others who are present, who are registered Democrats in your community. Oftentimes you might pledge who you're supporting, and oftentimes you might go undecided. There are people who, have been longtime activists who go every year. They may or may not have a candidate when they were elected back in caucus season, which is February. And, as candidates, we're all trying to get to as many caucuses as we can to meet delegates, to introduce ourselves.
You've been very active and following you on Facebook doing that.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, it's part of the opportunity to meet people, to listen, to introduce yourselves to them. And then that all leads to a signature drive, which is next. In order to qualify for the ballot, you have to have, in my race, 10,000 signatures.
So you have to do signatures again?
No,
Oh,
we've already
okay.
done that.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a-
So we have a caucus phase where you're
Right,
trying
okay.
to meet people at caucuses. We have a signature phase where
Okay,
you have to have up to 10,000 registered Democrats or independents sign to support your run for lieutenant governor. And then there's this convention that just happened this weekend. That's why my voice is sounding the way it is, where you have to get the votes of delegates, a majority of the votes of the delegates who are present. In this case, we actually had a hybrid convention, so you could be in person or at home and voting to support your candidacy. And I was fortunate to win the Democratic nomination with 41% of the vote. And and unfortunately, we had two of our lieutenant governor candidates who did not receive a minimum of 15%, which is required to move forward.
So there's 3 left now?
There's three.
There's 3.
Correct.
But we have 2 candidates on the Democratic side for governor.
Correct.
And coincidentally, both women.
How exciting, Bill.
And so 3 out of the 5 candidates for the governor and lieutenant governor's office are female.
It's actually 4. There's a female rep who made
okay.
it through for lieutenant governor.
Oh,
so
that's okay. All
4
right.
out of 5
4 out of 5
are women.
Wow, the world is changing, isn't it?
Future is female.
The future is female.
Yeah.
Well, I'm on my way out anyway. So, do you speak with the 2 candidates for governor at all through this process? Are you maintaining or establishing a rapport or strengthening a rapport with both of them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we see each other on the campaign stump pretty frequently. I was just in the Dorchester Day Parade yesterday, saw several of the candidates who are running for office. During caucus season, we're all making our pitches, introducing ourselves to folks. So we certainly see each other quite frequently. I think we're at the point of the campaign where any of us could give any other candidate's stump speech because we've heard it so often. So I think there's a fair amount of camaraderie now. I'm sure it'll get a little pricklier as we head towards, the primary. Overall, though, I think it's a really good field of candidates in all of these races, and excited that so many people want to step up and try and help improve Massachusetts. It's exciting times.
It sure is. It's certainly interesting times. We just live in some of the most interesting times.
I agree.
That you're ever going to have. There's always been a question about what a lieutenant governor does. The answer in the past basically has always been they do nothing. Sort of like the vice president. But I remember Salucci being fairly active under Governor Baker and
Governor Weld.
Governor Weld, excuse me. But under Governor Baker, the lieutenant governor's role seemed to have transitioned to a more active role. A lot of traveling, a lot of schmoozing, it seems. But what do you expect or actually want to do as a lieutenant governor?
I think the last 2 lieutenant governors, both current Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito and former Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray, and others as well, but those 2 are the most recent ones, really solidified a role in ensuring that the Lieutenant Governor was the chief liaison to cities and towns. There are 351 cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth, different regions, different regional needs, different economic needs, And it's important that we have a strong connection to the State House, understanding what's happening on the ground, what are the needs for a particular community or region, and how does that connect to action at the state level. So they've been meaningful. As I'm going around, there are lots of folks who really appreciate the opportunity. You may not be able to get the governor on the phone, but you can always get lieutenant governor on the phone, and that liaison role. I hope to amplify that as someone who has been a local leader. I know how difficult the job can be, and how these opportunities to combine state resources, state technical assistance, the power of convening. If you're in a role like that, you have greater access to private investment sector and can start to steer where things might happen, make sure people are aware of opportunities that exist. This Commonwealth has a lot going for us, particularly in Greater Boston and in Kendall Square, but we have other areas that have been neglected, frankly, and need our attention and need us to dig down a little bit deeper and make sure we're not only promoting but championing success and economic prosperity in other regions. I hope as Lieutenant Governor to be that key liaison. I also think, and I know this is myself as mayor, that you need a strong team around you. It is a big state, it is a big job. As mayor, I rely on a strong team of people around me to help influence what's happening, to help do the work. I think it's important, as a state administration, that you have folks who bring experience. I hope to be able to be a strong partner to our next governor. Given the fact that I've led a city for 16 years, I think that's know-how. There's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of sensibility when you're making decisions for neighbors and friends. It's like direct accountability. You're going to see people the next day. Oftentimes in the State House, it can feel a little distant from the decisions that you make and the impact it's having on the ground. So I hope to be able to, shed light as necessary, help influence and understand when you make a decision here as a policy or, a legislative decision, it has impacts on how it gets implemented on the ground. How do we make sure there are not unintended consequences? How do we think about the role of being lieutenant governor in a way that works in concert with the governor to carry out a strong agenda that recognizes the needs of what's happening in the ground where people live, on the places where people live?
You use the word partnership, very important word.
Yes.
Sometimes a misused word. Partnership is important in everything we do, especially in government. So from my perspective and the perspective of a lot of people, the single most powerful political figure in the state is the Speaker of the House. It's not the governor. I mean, if you really break it down, it's an arguable point.
Yep.
But the Speaker of the House is, you got the President of the Senate, the Speaker, and you got the governor. It's a troika. It's a three-headed monster, if you will.
Right.
And frequently, the Speaker of the House seems to be the most influential political figure in the state, from my perspective anyway, and I think from many others' perspective. How are you going to deal with that, you and whoever the incoming governor may be, if you're the lieutenant governor? How are you going to deal with the fact that you're not necessarily the strongest figure in the room when it comes to negotiating with the legislature?
Yeah, I mean, that's what government's about. I'm grateful to have the Speaker's endorsement in this race, and hope that when you put smart people around the room to talk about issues and challenges and are trying to deliberate and come to a solution, you can get there. It's frankly no different than some of the conversations we have between the city council and the mayor. Stakes are higher, the geography is a lot larger, but the idea that we're going to listen, we're going to take input, we're going to try and shift and make changes, and sometimes we're going to disagree and we're not going to get 100% support. I think that's pretty consistent. And we have a Senate president, a Speaker of the House, a governor, lieutenant governor, who get together regularly for leadership meetings to try and, I think, do just that. How are we going to advance some things? And it can be frustrating at times, the pace, right? I think for me, that's going to be the biggest adjustment, is the pace. We're used to wanting to do something, having conversations, seeking input, and then acting. And that's because we have to. People are relying on us. And I hope that I can help move things along in a way that's supportive and collaborative and collegial. But that's the job, right? That's the job of working together. And no one said it's easy, but that's the only way we actually achieve success.
I think if you compare the legislature, our legislature, with our city council, the state legislature is much more leadership driven. The leadership is much more entrenched, much more consistent, and much stronger and strident in what they want. It's probably somewhat less of a collaborative body than the Salem City Council for that reason. Not that they're not collaborative.
Right. I mean, it's also a larger geography.
Absolutely.
The issues in Worcester are different than the issues in the Cape, and the issues in Springfield are different than the issues in Gloucester. You know, so you have folks who bring a different lens. They're trying to represent their district. There are going to be things that might be good for one community that are not so great for another community, and so you've got to recognize
The bridge tolls.
Yeah, right. So you've got to recognize that balancing act is definitely going to look different than just being in one community. But hopefully the approach and the skill set, you know, you're not trying to burn bridges. We're trying to advance things, and you're probably not always going to get 100% of the loaf. But can we get half? Can we get 3/4? How do we have win-wins? You know, that's what I think we're often striving for. And how do we have disagreements and not become disagreeable and make it personal? Like, that's not really what it's about.
It's getting harder to do these days.
It is, certainly between different parties. I mean, Massachusetts is largely a blue state, and the legislature is largely, you know, Democratic, in both bodies, the Senate and the House. You know, you'd like to think, with also a Democratic governor, there are ways to advance a common agenda. It may not be everything everybody wants at the same time, but opportunities for us to continue to do the work that people rely on us to do. And in my mind, that's getting stuff done. That's what we do at the local level, and that's the kind of lens I hope to bring to the State House.
Well, if you take a look, you step up to the federal legislature, to the Congress, the vice president has a small but formal role in the Senate. It's defined by law. Is there a formal or defined role for a lieutenant governor within the legislature?
Not within the legislature. The two formal duties of the lieutenant governor are chairing the governor's council, which makes judicial appointments, approves pardons and commutations, and chairing the local government advisory council, LGAC, which brings together municipal leaders on a regular basis once a month to meet and go through specific agenda items.
The Governor's Council, actually a very important body.
Very important.
And they take a lot of heat occasionally for various decisions made by judges. We went through that here in Salem a few years back.
We did.
A lot of political hay made during that period. Do we do a good job overall of appointing these judges?
You know, I do think that we have a strong judicial nominating committee. I was just visiting another state, visiting some family there, and they're electing judges still. And like, you know, you had TV commercials with judges trying to, you know, outdo each other for how tough they are, you know, hang 'em high type approaches. And we don't want that. I mean, so I do believe we have a process where we want to review candidates, make sure that they have the qualifications, the skill set, the value system in terms of, you know, relating the laws to people in positions. And then they have to go through a governor's council after they go through a judicial nominating committee. Then they have to go to the governor's council, where again, there's another layer of who are you? What type of judicial appointment are you going to be? And it's not just judges, it's clerks, it's registrars, it's people who are in positions of influence within the judicial system. So, you know, I think it's good. I also believe there's always room for improvement, more transparency, ability to really track with metrics. Who are we putting on judges, both you know, backgrounds, race, experiences. We're prosecutorial heavy sometimes. So let's better track that. Let's understand, you know, where our judicial appointments are coming from, what kind of experience they bring to the table, and how do we make sure it's reflective of the Commonwealth? What's our profile? But you know, I look forward to hopefully being in a role to help influence that, and assuredly making it more open and transparent. The Governor's Council is not well known because people, you know, you have to be there. Those meetings need to be streamlined, live, opportunities for folks to understand what the Governor's Council actually does.
Do we not? Their meetings are public, or?
Their meetings are public. At one point, they were being streamed, you know, virtually. They stopped. I believe they are back being virtually streamed. But you know, there's more we can do to be transparent with respect to how we operate that body.
Okay, so once a governor or the Governor's Council appoints a judge, off they go now. They're hearing cases. They're making decisions. They're impacting lives.
They are.
What's the review process? Any job I ever had, at least once a year, somebody sat me down and told me I was either doing really, really good or the other way.
Right.
And then they told me what they needed me to do to get back up to good. Of course, that really never happened in any of my interviews.
Yeah.
Sure. How do we hold these judges accountable for their job performance?
Once a judge is appointed, there is a Judicial Conduct Commission. It operates out of the Administrative Office of the Trial Court. There is a process to ensure if lawyers, anyone who's come before a judge, can file complaints and petitions if they feel though they've been mistreated, maligned, or somehow positions were being taken that were outside the lines of the law. So that process does exist. It's not under the Governor's Council, to be clear. It's part of the judicial system and the Administrative Office of the Trial Courts.
Well, let me parse this, and you're a lawyer, so you could tell me whether I'm off base, on base, or, struck out or hit a triple. They're basically reviewing themselves. The legal system is. It's a judicial council. I don't know if there's other judges on it, there's lawyers on it, there's people that have to deal with these judges that are on these councils. Is that really a proper and fair review system, or should that change?
Right.
And maybe, I'm not going to say lay people, but people from other parts of or even outside the legal system with other perspectives other than, I want to be a judge too? I'm being kind of hard here, but is that system really the system? Should they be reviewing themselves like that? Because from my perspective, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, the old never ask the baker if the bread is fresh, because
Exactly
they'll tell you
right.
it will every time.
Exactly
I think is where
right.
you're going.
Yes.
I will say it seems to be working. I have not dug deep into this area because it is sort of outside the bounds of what I currently do now. We do have a process that allows folks to file petitions. I also think we have a process to put us in a place that we're that we're appointing people who have strong credentials, who have sort of been vetted. That doesn't mean that there can't be things that go wrong, to your point. And if there are ways to strengthen that, we'd have to do that legislatively. There would need to be legal authority to create a judicial conduct commission that might be outside the bounds of the AOTC, of the Administrative Office of the Trial Court, or involve the Bar Association or others. And there are external pressures that can come to bear already within the system. So there may be ways to strengthen that to help support what you're saying.
Many other complaints that people have involve the bail system, involve people being released too early, put that in the air quotes, or people being released that shouldn't be released, that should be held longer. Who reviews that system? Is that a legislative responsibility, or is that strictly a judicial?
It's more in the court system, actually.
Right.
And I mean, there have been some moves made to look at how are we setting bail. It's set by laws right now. And I think you'll see district attorneys who are really weighing in on that. There's been a number of district attorneys who have, tried to look at criminal justice reform through the lens of, are we holding people that are really impacting their lives in a negative way for long periods of time because they couldn't make bail? Is poverty keeping people in jail while they're waiting for their actual hearing? And you're tending to see bail reductions in place, and nonprofit groups have stepped up to make bail payments for others. If there's reform that's necessary, it's going to be coming from that branch, both district attorneys, criminal defenders, and courts and legislative officials working together.
Okay, that's not a bad answer. I'll give you that one.
Thank you.
Well, these are just questions, but they're not easy. They're really not easy conversations to have. There's so many different opinions out there.
Agreed.
So you get the nomination in September, we'll say.
Hypothetically, hopefully.
Okay.
Hopefully, hypothetically.
The question on everybody's mind, and you don't necessarily, I don't think you can answer this right away. You could resign as Salem mayor that night or the next day. You could theoretically resign after the general election if you get elected, which would probably be the better move than resigning after the primary. Or you could wait until the end of the year and resign. Now, you don't have to, I'm not asking when you're going to resign, but what kind of thought are you giving to that? Because there's a lot at stake if you move on. Obviously, a mayoral special election. There's already Facebook posturing by multiple people very aggressively. What kind of thought are you giving to that? Because it's very important to us here in Salem.
I'm
that
not
decision.
counting any chickens before they hatch, Bill, for sure. And, I'm head down. We are not going to lose any ground in Salem. We are moving forward with all the initiatives that we have underway, from obviously the budget that's in right now, spending a lot of time on that process, going through with the city council. We've got new city councilors, many of whom are walking through their first budget. We've got signature parks projects underway. We're cutting the ribbon on Forest River. The Willows Phase 1 will be wrapped up soon. We're moving forward with a new pier there. So we've got federal funding that we're trying to make sure we're being smart with. Some of that's tied into our capital projects in this year's budget. So we're trying to advance projects and initiatives, ensure that we're supporting our post-COVID recovery efforts in a way that's strident. And I feel good about the work that we're doing locally in the community. So my head is down. Yes, I have a lieutenant governor's race, but my head is down, right now as well, working obviously hard to keep doing the good work that we need to do here in Salem. Excited about our future. I love the city of Salem. I mean, I've been in love with Salem since I came here as a college kid. So I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we keep advancing and moving forward.
So you're taking it one day at a time.
That's exactly right.
That's what you should. That's basically the answer I've been giving anybody that asks me, as if I would know. I said, it's too early, and resigning after the primary would definitely be far too early. Yep. To make a decision like that. So you're looking at a role similar probably to what Karen Polito and, like you said, Tim Murray and previous lieutenant governors have done. But I'm going to kind of backtrack on that question. Beyond that, what do you want to do as lieutenant governor if you get there?
I definitely want to amplify the role of communities and help assist with growth within cities and towns, because I do think it's the most important branch of government that we all rely on. But there's some key issues that I think impact this entire Commonwealth, housing being one of them, the inability for us to have the housing that we need to meet the needs of our young adults, to meet the needs of folks who want to age in place. We have vulnerable citizens who don't have enough housing to meet their demands. It is at a crisis level, and we need to step up as a Commonwealth to champion a pro-housing agenda in all of our communities, and then also provide the support for infrastructure advancements that are going to be necessary as communities grow. So that is something key that I hope to be able to work on. And the second part is schools. I chaired the Salem School Committee. The Lieutenant Governor doesn't have any sort of a formal role with public education, but as someone who has been, a public school parent, who's a graduate of higher education, a public higher ed system, both myself, my husband, 2 of our 3 kids, I know the value that public higher ed makes to our Commonwealth, and I know the work that we have to do in our schools coming out of this pandemic. It is not going to be easy. Kids and educators have been some of the biggest victims of this pandemic, and it's playing out in our schools. And truth be told, a lot of what we were doing in schools wasn't working for many of our kids even before the pandemic. So we can't go back to the way it was before. This stage we're in right now feels very messy and a little bit chaotic. So what are we transitioning to? Our students are telling us they want an experience in schools that relates more to what they're going to be doing after they get out of school. That's early college and career opportunities. That's investing in vocational and technical skills. That's helping think about community service and jobs, counting actually for credits within high school, putting our students in a position where they have flexibility and choice about what they're learning. Some of our kids really appreciated Zoom, much the way we do. All the rigmarole of getting up and getting dressed and getting to the bus stop and getting to school. Like, maybe there's some school opportunities that take advantage of virtual learning now that we've invested in all the technology and the equipment that could be beneficial for older kids in particular, obviously. So I think we need to have real hard conversations about, what's the next iteration of public education look like? Should it include 4-year-olds? We know the value of high quality pre-K. Should we be really thinking hard about what high school looks like? Today, high school looks very much like it did when you and I went to high school. And yet our kids are graduating into a world that is so different. How do we support them through that transition and do so in a way that it's engaging? Because right now it's a little flat, and we're seeing that play out. And there's all kinds of anxiety and trauma related to the level of disruption. Peers learn from other peers. And we had lots of time over the last several years where kids were isolated, not in each other's company, with a lot of screen time. So we've got work to do, and I hope to be able to at least share in the opportunity for us to do what we're doing better as we move forward.
If this pandemic brought one positive with it, it is the forced introduction and use of the hybrid meeting system on many levels. What do you say, Kim, to people out there on the campaign trail? Maybe you've gotten these questions, maybe you haven't. I expect if you actually get on the ticket, you will get the questions. What do you say to people that question the state of the education system here in Salem? Who question how you've run the school system?
Well, number one, I don't run the school system, right? I'm the chair of the school committee. I set policy. and I have to bring resources. I feel that's my one key job is making sure we have the dollars to do the work in our schools. We have qualified superintendents, excellent teachers, hardworking principals. I think our schools are serving our students and our families very well. That does not mean that we're doing everything perfect and there isn't room for improvement. As we came through COVID, you saw the strength of the systems that we have. Salem was far surpassing other districts. One, keeping our kids and teachers and staff safe, pool testing early, one of the leaders in that effort early on, well before the state adopted any of those policies. We had technology. We were one of those communities that turned on a dime more readily than so many others because we already had the infrastructure and the scaffolding set up. In terms of family engagement and support services, we had a bead on where our families were, where our kids were, what their needs were, because we had programs like City Connects and family engagement counselors in every single school. So I think we're doing a heck of a good job serving kids and families, and I think we can do a heck of a lot more going forward. I would never underestimate how hard it is in cities like Salem, gateway districts, where you have kids who were read to every night by parents who were both college educated since birth. That happened a lot in my household. We have kids who come here with a lot of trauma, some economically disadvantaged students, folks for whom English is not their first language, who are working hard. And I think it makes our schools more livable, our community more livable. It's the place I'm grateful that I raised my family, where my kids had exposure to different cultures, different languages, different experiences. But it doesn't make education easy. It makes it hard. And we've dug in. We were early adopters of, universal breakfast and lunch. We're a place that celebrates thriving youth and are working hard to do that. And we have work to do. Like many communities, we're wrestling with how do we do this in an equitable way? Are our students who come from different backgrounds feeling or identify differently, feeling safe, respected, and heard? How do we get better at that? So there's always work to do, Bill. But I would take anybody on who says our schools are not doing really good work serving our students and our families.
All right, so we're gonna step now into another difficult conversation piece, or a hot topic item, which is the race issue, the racism issue. Salem High School graduated on the Common the other day, and the salutatorian, a very well-spoken young lady.
Very bright. Headed to Dartmouth.
Headed to Dartmouth, gave a very strident, and I use the term strident, very strident, very strong speech, basically questioning Salem's commitment and the school system's commitment and the high school's commitment in particular to equity and to actually countering or combating racism. Questioned it strongly.
Yep.
I talked to a few different people that listened to her speak, and there were those that say that was a very good speech, very well done, very well written, and they were. But there's also some that feel that it was an angry speech and not fair and insulting. I don't quite go along. I don't go along with that view. But did you hear the speech?
Yes.
Any thoughts on that?
I really value, we ask our students to tell us what's working and what's not, and I really value the perspective that Awa, this young student, brought to her experience. I don't question it. If we want to get better, we have to ask people, how are we doing? And she responded in her remarks.
She did not speak as a young student, that is for sure.
She is amazing.
That is a world-wise.
She is bright, she is articulate. Yes. She has strong social justice values. I think she's been an asset to our community and to our high school. And we need to be willing to listen to that and to learn from that. Now, everyone's going to have an opinion about,
without a doubt,
what transpires at the high school, but we ask students for their opinion. We need to listen and we need to respond. And I think the high school and our district and our community, like so many communities across America, are having these conversations. We had a race equity task force. I don't question the experience of a student of color, and I want to make sure we're listening to what she's saying and trying to act to do better. That's our job as adults. How do we do better? And I think it's a powerful opportunity within our city, our Commonwealth, our country at this time, for us to step up as adults, people who have an opportunity to influence what's happening, and do better in this regard. And I hope to be, able to do that.
So now we'll lead right into same subject in reality, the driver's license initiative, which the governor doesn't want to do. The legislature
vetoed it,
obviously has
yeah.
the votes to overturn, is giving driver's licenses to, I'm going to use both terms, illegal alien, undocumented immigrants.
I prefer undocumented.
As do I,
Right.
but the discussion is out there. That's a hot button issue all by itself. Should we be giving driver's licenses to the undocumented? And if we do, how is it really possible that it could lead to voter fraud at any level?
Yeah.
And are there protections that are in place for that?
Yeah. I mean, emphatically, yes. I supported this back when it was called the Safe Drivers Bill. It's been before the legislature for a multitude of years. I mean, going back 10 years now. And there are other states that do this, 17 other states, I believe, right now, many of which are red states, by the way, that have authorized.
I've lived in a couple of those red states.
Yep, have authorized driver's license for folks who are undocumented. It makes no sense that we wouldn't. We have a failed federal immigration policy. We allow driver's licenses for individuals who are here with green cards. Do we worry about that causing, any sort of voter issue or voter fraud? No, there's systems in place to protect the information when you're becoming a registered voter versus someone who carries a green card, is here as a naturalized, in a naturalized citizen role, or not a naturalized citizen yet, maybe on their pathway. You can get a driver's license. So if we have somebody here who's undocumented, don't we want those individuals to be able to work, to go to the doctor, to take on tasks like so many of us? So I fully support it. I understand the governor vetoed it. I think the legislature will override it and let us join the 17 other states who know this is what's important for public safety. If folks are going to be driving, you want them to be insured and licensed.
Now, of course, I think it's New York City allows green card holders to vote. Is that?
I did not know that.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure. I may be wrong on that, but it leads to the major question: is the road to citizenship for the undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
It's very long. It's very cumbersome. Is it fair? How can we change it? I know it's really not a state thing, but
Right.
state officials can advocate at the federal level. How do we clean up? How do we streamline and quicken that system so that those that really deserve it should be able to do it in a reasonable period of time without having to wait 7 years, 10 years
Absolutely.
or more? How do we do
I mean,
that?
you're talking to the daughter of a naturalized citizen. My mom is from Trinidad. She was born there, grew up there, born in Grenada, grew up in Trinidad. We absolutely need common sense immigration reform. This country was built on immigrants, many of whom came to this country with far less paperwork and process than we have in place now. We know there are folks who are here, who have been here for years, who have raised families here. We have a whole generation of students, our DACA students. They deserve the hope and promise and opportunity that their peers that they're going to school with in our community and so many others have. I am a strong advocate for immigration reform that allows folks a pathway to a green card, a pathway to citizenship, and puts our country in a place that we need workers, we need individuals here. And it makes no sense to me that we continue to fail at the national level in Washington at coming up with a way to address this circumstance.
All righty. Well, I think we asked the right questions here today. Okay. Now, the fact of the matter is that after this interview airs, I'm going to have numerous people are going to come up and talk to me and tell me I didn't go hard enough at you, that I didn't ask the questions hard enough, that I didn't come at you the right way, and I was too nice to you. So I think I asked the right questions, and I did try to be nice, and that's just too bad. I wish you the
You're such
best.
a nice guy, Bill. That's what it is. You just can't help it.
I don't hear a lot of that.
Said no one ever.
Yes, I don't hear a lot of that. But that's okay. I can live with it. I am what I am, as Popeye said. So thank you very much. Get back out there on the campaign trail.
Thanks, Bill.
I honestly do wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
With a caveat. I don't like you leaving. I wish you. I would rather have seen you fulfill your term. You understand that? I emailed you the very next day. Again, tried to be nice.
Yep.
But I emailed you the very next day and said, what the hell are you doing to us? But good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
Anytime.